Gordon, welcome back to the Apex. Just give us your thoughts on tonight and sitting there and watching the action close up.
That was a really exciting card. From start to finish, the matches were amazing. Achilles kicked it off against Andy Valera, high-paced match, and the stalling calls were, at times, in my opinion, a bit much, but it definitely did force the action to be pushed. I think that was one of the most exciting jiu-jitsu cards I've ever witnessed as far as action goes, and just level of talent overall.
How much of that excitement would you attribute to the new rule set that was brought in tonight?
Well, you have to attribute, obviously to the athletes, but a lot to the new rule set as well, just because, in the past with the EBI rules, we've seen a lot of stalling until overtime, and now those negatives are a curveball because you could be killing someone, but if you get a negative, and even if you passed, 4 times, took the guys back, and you have a negative, you're still losing. So I think that, it's definitely an interesting rule set, and I think that obviously, as Fight Pass Invitational goes on, they're looking to make improvements every show, and I'm sure that they'll have some feedback and some changes for the next show to make it even more exciting.
Was it fun for you to sit there and see this rule set play out and be like, oh, I can strategize now, I can see how this plays out, so when I compete under these, I'll already know which way to go?
Yeah, it was, because this is the first time they did this rule set, and I've competed under ADCC rules before, but these are a little bit different, and the stalling calls are a lot more intense. So it was kind of like a combination between like a quintet with the very strict stalling calls and ADCC rules, all kind of thrown into like a submission-only rule set in the beginning. So it was definitely interesting, and it made for a very exciting event.
Last time you were here, it happened again. Nicky Rod called you out. This time he's throwing 50K on the table and saying, you throw 50K and we'll compete for 100 grand. Does any part of that interest you?
No. Nicky Rod and that whole team make their career off sound bites for me, so no comment. Not interested in that at all.
That's fair enough. And then in that case, I'd like to ask you about something else outside of tonight. I haven't got to see you since you trained with Jon Jones. I'm curious, as someone who's quite cerebral and thought of as a very good thinker and tactician, what's it like training with another man who is thought like that? What was the biggest takeaway you took from training with Jon Jones?
With Jon, he's very similar to GSP, to George, in the sense that he's not the world's best wrestler. He's not the best jiu-jitsu guy. He's not the best striker. But his ability to put it all together is just on a different level. And even just grappling, like his ability to intuitively change his game plan from the start of the roll to the end of the roll, or from round to round, is incredibly impressive. So the most impressive thing, obviously, is his ability to put everything together, but his ability to adapt as the match goes on and change the game plan per what you're doing. And I was very, very impressed with him, just as a person and as an athlete, all around.
Yeah, I mean, this might be a weird thing to ask about Jon Jones, but was he almost better than you were expecting?
Yeah, for sure. You always go in and you don't know what to expect when you're training with athletes from other sports. Obviously, he doesn't focus on jiu-jitsu, but his wrestling is top notch. His jiu-jitsu is tough, and he's good from everywhere. And he learns incredibly quick. Most of the time, you see guys, young athletes usually learn, a lot faster. It's like the old saying, you can't teach old dogs new tricks. But he's nearing 40 now, and everything I taught him, if I taught him 5 things and he picked up 3, he instantly put those 3 things into his game, and he was like hitting them 100 times better by the time from the start of the week to the end of the week. So he was a really impressive person to be around.
Last one for me, and probably the most important question. No more silver. The beard, the hair's gone. What happened?
No more silver. So I was going to do something where I dressed as Santa for my last match, but I got hurt. And then once that ended, I was like, I had like this once a year. I did it last ADCC, and I was like, you know what? I have to do one time a year where I shave my hair off, and I stopped getting comments of people telling me I look like I'm 75 years old. And then, so we haven't had any more of those comments yet so far, but it was overdue. And my hair was getting super long. It was getting pulled in training. My beard's like getting pulled out during strangle attempts. So I was like, you know what? It's time to go. And now I'm rocking this atrocious mustache now.
Well, you said it, not me, but we hear about guys with beards when they finally make that shave. Did you look in the mirror and go, oh, fuck, I should have done that?
Well, it's funny, for the first like 3 days, every time I walk by a mirror, I like have to double take. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what I look like now. Or when I go to scratch my face and I get ready for the beard, to feel my beard and it's not there, and then I just hit skin and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have a beard anymore. So, but now I'm used to it. It's been like a week, 10 days or so, and I'm getting acclimated now.
And we're keeping the mustache?
For a little while. I had this thing. I know there's a picture somewhere of my dad with a Corvette posing with a mustache. So I want to find a picture of that and recreate it with the same clothes. So until I do that, I think I'm going to keep the mustache, at least. That's the plan right now.
Gordon. I just saw your Instagram post. Would you mind to give me your thoughts about Felipe Penna's performance and the main event as a total?
Yeah, so I just went on a little tirade about Penna. So basically, Penna's excuse for, him quitting in our last match was the fact that his best friend died. And that excuse was not legitimate, number one, because if he was too emotionally distraught to compete, he would have just not competed. And I offered to reschedule the match, which he didn't want to do. But today, he literally got broken inside 15 minutes. You can always tell when Penna breaks, he has the same exact sequence of events. His body language falls apart, then he starts bullying you, then he complains to the referee and rests, and then he just totally quits. And so he totally quit after he was complaining for 5 minutes to the referee, getting negatives. And then the second Marigali took his back, he just instantly gave up. The strangle wasn't even on, he just got the fingers underneath his neck and he immediately tapped. And so the excuse that, oh, my best friend died and that's why I quit. It's like, no, you're just a quitter. If you can't bully the guy, you just give up. And that's been proven fact tonight.
He is the only guy who has ever tapped you as a black belt. And you guys fought 3 times, he won twice, and you were, I guess at the beginning of the year, you guys were supposed to fight again. Do you still want to fight him to prove, since he's the only guy who tapped you, do you still want to beat him maybe 4 or 5 times?
Yeah, for me, I'm not really going to be comfortable until we have 5 matches, because then it will be 3-2 me. I don't want to have a tie score. I definitely don't want to have a losing score like I have right now. So, me and Penna definitely have to have a few more matches. And it's an interesting thing because no matter how many times Penna loses, he's just losing all the time now, people are still going to think that he can beat me because he's just beaten me before 7 years ago. So it's always a match that people are going to watch, regardless of how bad Penna is and how much he's losing now. So that match is a match that can just be made forever, even though Penna just can't beat anybody anymore.
Just 2 more questions. Would you mind to tell me what's the biggest difference from the last fight you guys had from now? Since how did you evolve and how did he evolve from there?
Well, I don't really see anything in his game that's been different or evolved in the last 3 or 4 years. He's just physically bigger every time, and he just gets tired a little bit faster, and he's stronger, for the first few minutes. As far as me, after, I fought him before ADCC, so it's been over a year now that since we've competed. I have a completely new, guard passing system. I have, new things that I'm doing. I'm just not a totally different athlete, but I'm far more evolved than I was when we fought the first time. And, we saw today that the second you turn up the passing pressure on him, Marigali has good passing pressure, and everyone's like, oh, he couldn't pass his guard in 45 minutes. Well, no, it was a no time limit match, so I was just cooking him underneath me. But Marigali just completely broke him, passing him in under 15 minutes today. So the longer he waits to compete against me, the longer that match takes to happen, the worse it's going to be for him.
Perfect. Last question for me. Since you brought the thing about his best friend, Leandro Loa, passed away, I guess the day before the last match you guys had. I would like to know your side of the story. I don't think I've ever heard, because Felipe says that you were asking for a lot of things about the match, and how was the negotiation? He tried to cancel. I would like to hear your side of the story.
Yeah, so I like to sleep late the day of my tournament because I like to do a big 18 to 24 hour fast before I compete, because my stomach is messed up, so I'm always nauseous. So I was sleeping until I slept until 4 p.m. and the event was coming up, and they had to wake me up and hey, Penna wants to pull out. So I woke up 3 hours before the match, and I hear that Penna wants to pull out. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So what I said was very simple. I said, listen, we're professionals. If you are too emotionally distraught to compete, I understand that. We can reschedule, fly back to Brazil, do the funeral, do whatever you have to do, and that's it. And I messaged Penna. I'm hey, you can do whatever you want, but if we're going to compete, let's put on a show. That's what Leandro would want. But I told Flo, I'm listen, if he wants to reschedule, we can reschedule, no problem. I'm but if he wants to compete, then be a professional and compete on the agreed upon terms, because Penna always tries to change the rule set. So we had a contract, which I had to pay lawyers to make a contract, and we agreed upon a contract, and it was my $100,000 versus his $10,000. The only way I could actually get him to compete was to put up $100,000 of my own dollars against $10,000 of his dollars in a 10-to-1 bet odds match on a no time limit match, which was specifically stated in the contract. So Penna wanted to change the match to 30 minutes. And I'm like, we change the rules every time we compete, and we have a contract for a no time limit match. I'm like, we're not doing this like 2 hours before the match. I'm like, if you want to compete, it doesn't matter if you compete for 10 minutes or for an hour. If you're okay enough to compete, you should be able to compete on the agreed upon terms. So my thing was simple. I was like, listen, either reschedule the match, no problem. You know, I've had to reschedule matches, obviously. I'm always falling apart. I was sick for the match that we were supposed to have. I just got hurt this match, so I understand it happens. But if you're going to compete, compete according to what we agreed upon. And, that was my thing. And Penna went into, this and that. He's a bad person. He's lying and this. It's like, no, dude, you said you weren't going to compete, you were too sad to compete, and then Flo offered you more money, and then you're like, oh, okay, I can compete. So basically, you just leveraged your friend's death to extort money out of Flo by saying you were too sad to compete until they offered you more money. Like, it's just a joke.
You got time for one more, guys?
I've got one just in front. Mason called you out as well. You were originally supposed to fight with him tonight. Is that something that still interests you, and what did you think of his performance?
Well, I mean, yeah, everybody wants a piece of daddy. Yeah, Mason I like. Mason's like an American legend. He's doing great things for the sport, and he's always been nice to me. So I have no problem with Mason. And unlike the B team guys who just need to have my name in their mouth because they don't win, and they need to build a career off of my sound bites. I haven't mentioned them in 6 months. Every single podcast that they do, every post that they make is trying to get a reaction out of me. So that's just I don't care about that anymore. But Mason has never said anything bad about me. He's always just wanted to compete against the best guys, and he went out and he dominated, his opponent from B team tonight, and he was very impressive. He hit a takedown, passed the guard pretty easily, solidified pins, moved through pins, and then eventually finished with the Kimura. So that was about as perfect of a performance as you can have for Mason. And that's a match that I've been trying to make. We've been trying to make for a long time, and logistically, it just hasn't really added up. So I'm really excited to get out there in 2024 and make that match happen.
Thank you.